Chapter 1261. Your Highness, you must be tired from your long journey. Please take a rest today. Tomorrow, my master will hold a welcoming dinner for the two of you. You will naturally be able to see my master then. As Yang Yong spoke, he bowed slightly. I will take my leave first. Seeing Yang Yong turn and leave, the third princess who had been silent all this time finally spoke. Brother Crown Prince, this Xinyuan Crown Prince has many talented subordinates. Such a person is actually only his housekeeper. You may not know this, but this Yang Yong was originally the second son of a large family in the Xinyuan dynasty. However, he has been by Xinyuan Mo's side since he was young. This person's ability and methods are extraordinary, and he is also loyal and devoted. He is extremely trusted by Xinyuan Mo's. The Xinyuan Crown Prince is known as the head of the 8 great empires. Brother Crown Prince, is that person really so outstanding? Can he be compared to you? The woman's voice carried a trace of curiosity as she inquired. In her heart, her brother Crown Prince was the most outstanding person. However, she had heard that the Xinyuan Crown Prince was the head of the 8 great empires. Even the monarchs of the 8 great empires did not dare to underestimate this person. This time, her father had also mentioned to her that he wanted to form a marriage alliance with the Xinyuan dynasty. This person was none other than her and him. On this trip, other than accompanying her brother, she also wanted to meet the Xinyuan Crown Prince, Xinyuan Mo's, who was praised and not to be underestimated. Was that person really that outstanding? Was he worthy of her? When Prince Qishui heard this, his expression changed slightly. A dark light flashed in his eyes. I also want to meet this Xinyuan Crown Prince. I want to see if he is really that outstanding. On the other side, after making arrangements for the 2 people in the north courtyard, Yang Yong came to the main courtyard. Entering the courtyard, he came to the table and called, Master. Yes, everything is arranged? Xinyuan Mo's was playing chess with Fengjiu. Therefore, he was staring at the chessboard and did not even raise his head. Yes, everything is arranged. They want to meet you, Master. I told them that you will be holding a welcoming dinner for them in your residence. You will meet them tomorrow. He explained the arrangements to him. What's your impression of these two? He placed a piece, then raised his head to look at Yang Yong. Hearing this, Yang Yong glanced at Fengjiu and paused for a moment before saying, Very outstanding. Unexpectedly outstanding. Seeing him look at her before he spoke, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile, but didn't say anything. Hui Lang, on the other hand, was a little confused. He asked, Old Yang, why do you want to see little Li? This has nothing to do with him, right? On the side, Yingyi sighed inwardly, thinking, how come this idiot still can't see that the person sitting here is not little Li, but Ghost Dr. Fengjiu? Xinyuan Mo's also glanced at him, but didn't say anything. Instead, he said to Yang Yong, get someone to arrange it. I'll meet them tomorrow. Yes. Yang Yong replied before taking his leave. You two can leave as well. Xinyuan Mo's gestured for Hui Lang and Yingyi to leave. Yes. Yingyi replied. Only Hui Lang stood there and stared at the young man sitting there, then asked, Master, should we send little Li out as well? This kid has been hanging around you all day and doesn't do anything. I think it's better to send him out to sweep the floor, water the plants, and pull out the weeds than to just hang around here. Hearing this, Yingyi quickly left, not daring to stay any longer. Chapter 1262. Xinyuan Mo's heard this and coldly glanced at him. Hui Lang didn't see it because he heard the youth laughing. He was dissatisfied and stared at him. What are you laughing at? I'm talking to you. What are you laughing at? Seeing that Xinyuan Mo's was about to speak, Fengjiu stood up and motioned him to stay put. Thus, she smiled at Hui Lang. No, guard captain, you think you're right, so I'll get up and make room for you. Come, sit here. She went forward and pulled him to the place where she sat just now, which was right in front of Xinyuan Mo's. She smiled and said, You stay here and chat with Master. I'll go sweep the floor, water the flowers, and pull out the weeds. No, Udadi couldn't sit still because Master was staring at him coldly. Even if he didn't say anything, it gave him a kind of frightening pressure, which made him restless and wanted to escape. However, this youth kept forcing him to sit still. It's fine, you stay here and chat with Master. I think you must have a lot to say to Master. Just sit here. I'll go water the flowers first, she said, holding back her laughter as she walked out. No, don't go. He was scared this time. Let him sit in front of Master and chat with Master? He couldn't do such a stressful job. He wanted to stand up and leave, but who knew that at this time, he heard Master's voice. Where are you going? You're not going to sit? Xinyuan Mose coldly glanced at him. Hee, Master. I want to go sweep the floor, water the flowers, and pull out the weeds. I want Xiaoli to come back and chat with you, drink tea, and play chess. He smiled embarrassedly and looked at Master's nervous face. Didn't you say that she was wandering around here? Hee, how can that be? Not everyone can accompany Master to pass time. I'll go find her and bring her back. I'll bring her back now. He quickly stood up and walked out. Humph. Xinyuan Mose looked at the departing figure and snorted heavily. This idiot. Even the people around him could tell Fengjiu's identity. He was the only one who was still stupid. He had spent a lot of time with Fengjiu in the past. He actually couldn't recognize her even when she appeared in front of him all day. On the other side, Fengjiu walked around after leaving the courtyard. He took out a fruit from his space and ate it as he walked. When he passed by the rockery, he heard a voice. The servant over there, come here for a moment. She looked in the direction of the voice and saw a beautiful woman in a gorgeous dress standing in the garden on the other side of the rockery. In the pavilion behind the rockery sat a feminine man in a purple robe. When she saw the two people, she guessed their identities, but she didn't want to pay attention to them. However, since they pointed at her, she couldn't refuse. Thus, after eating the fruit in her hand, she walked around the rockery and slightly cupped her hands in greeting. Chapter 1263. Thinking about it, how could the princess of the Qishui dynasty, one of the 8 great empires, be ordinary? You know me? The Qishui princess was slightly surprised and glanced at the servant. I know. Everyone in the mansion knows that Prince Qishui and the 3rd princess came to our mansion. Hearing this, she nodded and asked, Then is your master in the mansion? Fengjiu grinned. He seems to be here, but also seems to be not. The beautiful princess frowned. What seems to be here, but also seems to be not here? I didn't see my master go out, but I also didn't see my master in the mansion, so I don't know if my master is here. Then where is your master's courtyard? The Qishui princess asked again. 3rd princess, our housekeeper said that a banquet will be prepared tomorrow. At that time, my master will give you 2 a welcome dinner. You will be able to see my master tomorrow. She smiled and didn't say anything. Prince Qishui, who was sitting in the pavilion, glanced at the figure. His feminine eyes flashed and he said to the 3rd princess, How difficult is it to see Xinyuan Mose? I have many ways to make him come out. As he spoke, he stood up and walked out of the pavilion. The 3rd princess was slightly surprised. She turned to look at her brother and asked, Brother Crown Prince, what do you mean? How to make Xinyuan Mose come out by himself? When they arrived at the mansion, Xinyuan Mose should come out to see them. After settling them down, he disappeared without a trace. It was obvious that he didn't put them in his eyes. At this time, Fengjiu looked at the figure walking towards her and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She secretly wondered what Prince Qishui wanted to do. Just as she was thinking, she heard a stern shout with pressure coming towards her. Audacious servant! You are so arrogant and impudent! The stern shout with a powerful pressure came, but Fengjiu still stood there without moving. She only scratched her head and looked around. Her gaze fell on Prince Qishui with some doubt. Your Highness, who are you talking about? Prince Qishui and the 3rd princess's expressions froze. They looked at the manservant, who looked as if nothing had happened, and saw that he could still stand there without moving, as if he couldn't feel the pressure that was pressing down on him. Kneel before me. Prince Qishui bellowed again with a sullen face. A pressure that could be seen with the naked eye enveloped the manservant in front of him. Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. As he retreated, he said, If your Highness and 3rd princess have nothing else to say, then I'll take my leave. Prince Qishui's eyes flashed when he saw that the servant was retreating as if he didn't feel anything. He suddenly reached out and attacked the servant who was retreating. You want to leave? Did I allow it? A sharp chi blade with a suppressive aura struck out. His hand quickly grabbed Fengjiu's neck as he retreated. He seemed to be angry and wanted to break Fengjiu's neck. Hiss! Stop! Hui Lang, who had come in search of Fengjiu, saw this scene and his face turned pale with fright. This little Li is Master's treasure. If he was killed by Prince Qi Shui, then the matter would be serious. As he shouted for the prince to stop, he rushed forward at the same time. However, due to the distance between them and the fact that the Qi Shui crown prince did not stop because of his shout, he could not help but feel his heart rise to his throat when he saw that the hand was about to grab Xiao Li's slender and fragile neck. He only felt his heart tremble in fear. Chapter 1264. This was because he saw the youth easily avoid Prince Qi Shui's chokehold. Although it was only a slight movement, the exquisiteness of his movements made him feel incredulous. He vaguely felt as if he saw someone's shadow. I didn't expect Crown Prince Xuanyuan's residence to be filled with hidden talents. Even a lowly manservant has such skills. Prince Qi Shui narrowed his eyes. His feminine gaze carried a trace of malice as he stared at the manservant who retreated. He was secretly shocked. If even a manservant had such skills, then how many hidden experts were there in this residence that he could not detect? Your Highness flatters me. I'm just an errand boy, she said with a fake smile. She stared at the two men for a while and said meaningfully, Prince Qi Shui, it's best that you don't be too impulsive. After all, you're a guest. Furthermore, my master is very protective. If someone is missing from this residence, he won't let it go easily. After saying this, her lips curled into a cold smile. She glanced at the two men and saw clearly what they were thinking. Prince Qi Shui, even if the people in our residence have done something wrong, we should be the ones to teach them a lesson. I hope there won't be a next time when a sudden attack like today will suddenly occur, Hui Lang said. He paused and looked at the two men, saying, I will truthfully report what happened here today to my master. After saying this, he said to Fengjiu, let's go. After all, they were guests here. Prince Qi Shui watched the two men leave and did not stop them. However, his gaze was gloomy and his heart did not feel good. Brother Crown Prince, let's go back first. The third princess stepped forward and said. Prince Qi Shui nodded and looked at the two men who had walked away. Only then did he walk towards the northern courtyard. Seeing this, Princess Qi Shui hurriedly followed and returned to the northern courtyard. On the other side, Hui Lang led his men away until they reached a tree. He stopped and looked at the person beside him in confusion. He called out tentatively, Ghost Doctor? Fengjiu? He called out again because he was very familiar with the way the youth had dodged. It was just like the Ghost Doctor's movement. He immediately reacted. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and smiled, saying, It's not easy for you to recognize me. It's really you. Hui Lang saw that she admitted it and could not help but feel astonished. He asked, Why are you here? And you came alone? You actually sneaked into the residence? That fellow Yang Yong and Ying Yi, did they know? The two of them actually didn't tell me about it. That's too much. He Qi Shui's words. How you've offended them. SSS rees SSS. They say SSSSSSSSSSS. They've gone too far. I'll definitely have Master deal with them. He said angrily, then said, That's right. Master is in the courtyard. Chapter 1265. Tell Yang Yong to go over and tell them that if they dare to touch the people in the palace again, they can immediately scram. A low voice filled with anger rang out. This anger was not for any other reason than the fact that the person Prince Qi Shui wanted to touch was Fengjiu. This was something that he could not tolerate. Yes. That shadow guard respectfully replied before leaving in a flash. Fengjiu, who was outside, walked in at this time. Seeing the dark expression on the person's face in the courtyard, his heart sunk. He found out so quickly? That's right. There were shadow guards everywhere in the palace. It would be strange if he did not know what happened in the palace. Are you in a bad mood? She asked with a smile as she walked to the table in the courtyard and sat down. That Prince Qi Shui's cultivation is not low. In the future, you have to be careful when you see him. He opened his mouth and reached out to hold her hand. I don't want to see you get hurt. Don't worry. I'll be fine. But that Prince Chishui will be a bit troublesome. She lightly smiled as her eyes flashed with a strange light. Seeing this, Xinyuan Mose was slightly surprised and asked, "What did you do?" "It's nothing much. I know that he's a guest in your palace, so naturally nothing can happen to him. So, I know what I'm doing." She smiled as her eyes narrowed. "You'll see tomorrow. You'll know tomorrow." Who was she? Who dared to touch her? If she wanted to deal with someone, she only needed to move her finger at any time. Moreover, no one would be able to find any evidence against her. Seeing the confidence in her words and the smile on her face, he did not ask any more questions. After all, no matter what, he had to see those two people tomorrow. He had to be a good host. From that night onwards, Prince Chishui had to go to the outhouse every hour. Moreover, it was the kind that went straight down. Even after taking medicine, it did not stop. It wasn't until the next morning that the completely exhausted Prince Chishui was brought back to his room to rest by the guards. After a night, his entire face was haggard, and he looked like he was about to collapse. In the middle of the night, Yang Yong, who had received the news, sent the physicians in the residence over to take a look. The conclusion was that the patient's stomach wasn't in good condition. Although he had taken the prescribed medicine, it didn't stop the diarrhea. Furthermore, as soon as he ate the medicine, he had to run to the latrine. "Early morning, brother Crown Prince. Are you feeling better?" The third princess stood outside the door and asked worriedly. It was unlikely that someone had tampered with the food, because the two of them had eaten the same food. Moreover, they were in the manor. She felt that it was impossible for Xinyuan Mose to do such a thing. But unfortunately, her crown prince brother had a stomachache at this time, and from last night until now, he didn't even have the strength to speak. "You can go to the reception banquet today." "I'm afraid I can't." The voice inside was halfway through when the door suddenly opened. A figure holding the door quickly walked out and went to the latrine at the back. Seeing this, the third princess was slightly startled. She glanced at the figure heading towards the outhouse and frowned slightly. Why was he the only one like this? There were physicians in their entourage as well. She had asked them, but they didn't find any other problems. It was just as the physician had said, that his stomach wasn't well because he wasn't acclimatized to the climate. It was noon when the third princess saw that he didn't dare to eat and was resting on the bed with an empty stomach. Only then did she turn and leave. Chapter 1266. Yang Yong came over to take a look and inquired about Prince Chishui's situation. After learning that Prince Chishui was unable to attend, he led the way for the third princess and led her to the front courtyard. Other than the two maidservants by her side, the third princess also had two gray-robed cultivators with her. They all arrived at the front courtyard and sat down in the front courtyard's hall under Yang Yong's arrangement. "Third princess, please wait for a moment. I will go invite my master." As he spoke, he bowed slightly and walked out. After waiting for a while, just as she was starting to get impatient, she saw a black figure walking towards her with steady steps. That person's back was facing the light, and his features could not be seen clearly due to the lighting. However, the powerful aura he exuded was extremely intimidating. Just his aura alone was already above her crown prince brothers. It was no wonder that this person was ranked first among the crown princes of the 8 great empires. "Third princess, this is our master," Yang Yong introduced as he retreated to the side. Only then did the third princess get a clear look at the person who had walked up and sat down. With just one look, her heart began to thump violently. Nervousness, anticipation, joy, and apprehension all surged up in her heart. With just one look, she was completely captivated. She only saw that the person's handsome features carried a hint of resoluteness. His handsome features were as sharp as a knife, and his 2 eyebrows were like swords. His deep black eyes were bottomless and contained an intimidating and domineering aura. Under his tall nose, his thin lips were slightly pursed, and all of these attracted her gaze. In particular, he was dressed in a black robe embroidered with dark cloud patterns and had a jade belt around his waist. His entire body exuded a fierce and restrained domineering aura of a king and a powerful expert. That kind of intimidating aura did not lose out to her royal fathers, causing her heart to skip a beat. This person, No wonder he was ranked first among the crown princes of the 8 great empires. His brilliance was above everyone else, and no matter how one looked at it, no one else could compare to him. In the past, she had thought that her crown prince brother was already a very outstanding person. However, after seeing him today, Xinyuan Mose finally understood what kind of man was a real man. In this world, there was actually such an outstanding man who gathered the essence of heaven and earth into his body. The domineering aura of a king was incomparably noble, dazzling like the stars in the 9 heavens, causing people to involuntarily fall head over heels and want to kneel at his feet. Fengjiu, who had followed behind her, saw the 3rd princess staring at Xinyuan Mose with a love-struck expression. He couldn't help but twitch his mouth and glance at the expressionless man sitting upright. Sure enough, a man's looks were a source of calamity. Why was this man so good-looking? Look at how mesmerized this woman is. She's completely mesmerized. Seeing that the infatuated princess was still in a daze, she cleared her throat and said loudly, "3rd princess, this is my master." Everyone in the hall was taken aback by her sudden outburst. Xinyuan Mose raised his eyes slightly and glanced at her. A trace of a smile flashed across his deep black eyes. As for Yang Yong, he had a gentle and appropriate smile on his face. However, when he heard her words, the smile on his face only deepened. Only the 3rd princess, who was caught off guard by this sudden shout, was so frightened that her delicate body trembled. She hurriedly came back to her senses, and after composing herself, she glanced at the servant who was walking towards Xinyuan Mose and recognized him as the person from yesterday. Chapter 1267. Sit. Xinyuan Mose gestured and didn't say anything else. The 3rd princess's name was Shui. She was both a princess and the #1 beauty in Chishui City. Now, Xinyuan Mose only glanced at her indifferently. His gaze was as indifferent as water, without a trace of emotion. He didn't even show a trace of surprise. She couldn't help but lower her eyes and move forward. She lowered her head, revealing the side of her beautiful face. Her figure was graceful, her steps were light, and her skirt fluttered lightly. She was as beautiful and enchanting as a fairy. Fengjiu, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but praise. This woman was indeed as beautiful as a fairy. She looked at Xinyuan Mose and saw him sitting there expressionlessly. He didn't even look at the princess. She couldn't help but find it funny. Was it because she didn't dare to look at the beauty here? She didn't say he couldn't look. Her eyes moved slightly. She stepped forward to the table and poured wine for the 2 of them. Seeing this, Xinyuan Mose looked at her again. When his gaze fell on her, his deep black eyes flashed with either a trace of a smile or a trace of affection. This time, even Princess Shui, who was sitting down, noticed it. She couldn't help but look sideways. Following Xinyuan Mose's gaze, she looked at the servant who was pouring wine. Looking at him, this servant didn't seem to have anything special. But yesterday, when her brother wanted to use this servant to lure Xinyuan Mose out, this servant's performance was somewhat unexpected. She couldn't see any spiritual energy fluctuations on his body, but he should be an expert. Otherwise, how could he avoid her brother's chokehold? However, this Crown Prince Xinyuan didn't look at a beauty like her. Instead, he looked at a delicate and pretty servant. Could it be that she couldn't compare to a servant? Yang Yong, who was waiting on the side, looked at this scene and couldn't help but find it funny. In the past, he had only heard about the matter between Master and the Ghost Doctor. When he heard Grey Wolf and Shadow say that Master had done many things for the Ghost Doctor that made them flabbergasted, he originally thought that they were exaggerating. After all, his impression of Master had always been noble and cold. It was really hard to imagine how a person like Master could please a woman. However, just by looking at this scene, he knew that he didn't follow his master and must have missed many interesting things. I heard that Prince Chishui isn't feeling well. Are you feeling better now? Xinyuan Mose turned around and looked at Princess Yu, who was sitting across from him. Perhaps he's not acclimatized, but he is already better, thanks for your concern, she softly said. Her beautiful eyes were like water, looking at the man full of masculinity, but, if you, and When Yang Yong heard this, he lowered his head and hid the smile in his eyes. Fangzhou stood beside Xinyuan Mo's with a wine jug and looked at the sky. When Princess Ing Shui heard this, the smile on her face froze. Let a housekeeper take me out to play? Then what about him? Can he refuse just because he is busy? Could it be that she was so unworthy of his attention? He didn't even have the mood to accompany her out to play? Chapter 1268. The Qishui Empire and the Xinyuan Empire want to form a marriage alliance. I wonder if the Crown Prince knows about it? She raised her eyes and asked. Her voice was still soft and charming, as gentle as water. Fangzhou's eyes moved slightly as he looked at the princess. Xinyuan Mo's raised his wine cup and took a sip. His deep and magnetic voice was heard unhurriedly. Could it be that the princess has taken a fancy to one of the princes of the Xinyuan Empire? Hearing this, Princess Ing Shui smiled. In an instant, her smile was like a blooming flower. It was extremely beautiful. I know that other than the crown prince, there are other princes in the Xinyuan Empire. However, Ing Shui wants to say that if it's a marriage alliance, Ing Shui will only marry you. Was she confessing on the spot? Fangzhou looked at Princess Ing Shui with a strange expression. She dared to say it in front of him. This Princess Ing Shui was really something. If it was another man, he would have fainted from excitement after hearing this. Fortunately, the one she had taken a fancy to would not be so easily charmed. Therefore, she wanted to say, Princess Ing Shui, I'm sorry that you're late. This man is already reserved by me. I'm not interested in you. Xinyuan Mo said coldly in a deep voice. There was not a trace of gentleness in his voice. He directly stated his intentions and completely ignored Princess Ing Shui's beautiful face, which was as beautiful as a flower, turning pale in an instant. Since Prince Qishui is not feeling well, the princess should go back and take care of him first. If he is not getting better, I can ask someone to send you back to the Qishui Empire so that Prince Qishui's health won't be affected. Hearing those rude words, Princess Ing Shui raised her eyes and stared at him. Is this how the crown prince acts as a host? Is this how the Xinyuan Empire treats its guests? No, the princess misunderstands. This is how I treat my guests. I've already treated the princess and Prince Qishui well enough. His voice paused as he looked at her with a piercingly cold gaze. If anyone dares to make a move on this monarch's people in this monarch's residence, this monarch will definitely order people to kill them on the spot. His deep and dignified voice carried a cold aura. He was telling her that if they were not the crown prince and princess of Qishui province, then yesterday's matter would not have been settled so easily. Ing Shui's heart trembled when she was stared at by his deep, dark eyes. She could clearly see the coldness and mercilessness in his eyes and understood that he was not joking around. He really meant it. At this moment, her heart was slightly shocked. This Xinyuan Mo's once again gave her a sense of impact that she had never felt before. If it were anyone else, it would be impossible for them to say such words. No matter what, they would have to consider the diplomatic relations between the two countries and leave some face. However, he had said such words. This was clearly telling them that he dared to do what others dared not do. What others might care about, he wouldn't. After a long time, she stood up and bowed slightly. Ing Shui will take her leave first. She turned around and walked out. When she was about to step out of the door, she paused and turned around to look at the man who was sitting upright and said, "One day, I will make you marry me willingly." With that, she left. Fangzhou curled her lips and glanced at the man who was looking at her. She said in a bad mood, "Men are trouble." Chapter 1269. Yang Yong glanced at the two of them, smiled, and silently retreated. Fangzhou sat down at the table, one hand supporting his chin as he stared at him. Suddenly, he smiled strangely and said, "Let me tell you something." Hearing this, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "What is it?" In the past few years when you weren't around, although I was dressed as a man, I was still able to attract many outstanding young men and women. When I walked on the streets, there were also people who threw fruits at me to express their love. His black eyes smiled and he nodded. "Yes, I believe that. Also, you know Imochen, right? He said he was the disciple of the Tianji elder and that he would wait for me here." After saying this, the The man's face darkened. His handsome brows furrowed and his thin lips pursed. He said sourly and with a bit of seriousness, "Why would he wait for you? That person is a gigolo. You have to be careful. Don't think he's harmless just because he looks like a banished immortal. That kind of person is even more dangerous. You have to know that you can't judge a book by its cover." "Oh, is that so? But I think he's quite good, and he doesn't get close to women." Hearing this, he hurriedly said, "I also don't get close to women. I only get close to you." "Don't get close to women?" she said with a fake smile. "But why do I remember that you have a beauty pavilion in the Yama Palace over there? There are pure ones, enchanting ones, plump ones, and petite ones. It can be said that there are 100 flowers dazzling, each with their own unique characteristics. And once, you even called 2 women over? The women in that beauty pavilion are useful. You know this too. Didn't you go for a stroll there? You should know that I didn't mess around. That matter back then wasn't my idea. It was all Hui Lang's idea." He directly pushed the matter to Hui Lang. Seeing her cross her arms and coldly snort, he hurriedly changed the topic. "There's a restaurant in the city that makes exquisite and delicious dishes. How about I take you to try it?" Hearing this, she smiled and asked, "Aren't you going to bring the number 1 beauty, Princess Ing Shui, who confessed to you? If she wants to go out, Yang Yong will take her. By my side, the only woman will be you." Hearing this, she felt much better. "All right then, I'll eat with you." Xin Yuan Mose couldn't help but laugh as he shook his head. After standing up, he held her hand and walked out. Their good mood wasn't ruined by Princess Ing Shui's appearance. Even though Fangjiu was jealous, he was still happy in his heart. After leaving the mansion, the 2 of them sat in the carriage with Ing Yi accompanying them. The 3 of them simply went to a restaurant in the city. In the northern courtyard, Princess Ing Shui was listening to a gray-clothed man's report. When she learned that Xin Yuan Mose had brought that servant out, she couldn't help but frown and ask, "Who is that servant?" A young man actually caught his eye. It's said that he's the distant nephew of the outer courtyard's manager. His name is Li Daniu. The gray-clothed man said. "The distant nephew of the outer courtyard's manager, Li Daniu?" She sneered. "That young man doesn't look good, but his skills are extraordinary. How could he be Li Daniu?" Chapter 1270. In the restaurant. When the shopkeeper saw that the person who came in was the crown prince, he hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. "Greetings, Your Highness." Xin Yuan Mose waved his hand and didn't say anything. He just glanced around. Ingyi stepped forward and ordered, "Prepare a private room for His Highness." This. The shopkeeper looked embarrassed. "What's wrong? Are there no more private rooms?" Ingyi asked. "Today's private rooms are all taken. But it's okay. I'll go up and discuss with them to make a room for Your Highness. Your Highness, please go to the 2nd floor and have a seat." He invited him upstairs and planned to discuss with the people in the private room. After all, he was the crown prince. His prestige spread far and wide. If he wanted a private room, he only needed to say a word. He believed that the people in the private room would let him have a seat if they knew it was the crown prince. Since there are people in the private room, it's the same for us to have a private room. Let's find a window seat on the 2nd floor. Xin Yuan Mose said. He then said to Fangjiu beside him, "The view from the private room on the 2nd floor is better. We can see the bustling scene on the street." "Well, then we'll have a private room." Fangjiu nodded. The shopkeeper couldn't help but look at the young man in the servant's uniform. When he heard them say that a private room was good, he hurriedly stepped forward and led them. "Your Highness, this table is good. This table has the best view." When the shopkeeper saw Xin Yuan Mo sit down and the young man in the servant's uniform also sit down in front of His Highness, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. When he saw the guard in black standing behind His Highness, he couldn't help but ask with a smile, "What would Your Highness and this young master like to eat?" He had seen all kinds of people. At this moment, if he still didn't know that this young man was not a servant, he would have lived in vain. He didn't dare. In the entire Xinyuan Empire, there were only a few people who dared to eat and sit with His Highness. "I'll have one of your specialties and a golden crispy skin roll." "All right, I'll get someone to prepare it right away," the shopkeeper replied and hurriedly retreated. All kinds of delicacies were placed on the table, and the aroma filled the air. Even before eating, Fengjiu could not help but swallow his saliva just by smelling the aroma. It looks delicious. Hearing this, he chuckled and picked up his chopsticks to help her. Eat it while it's hot. Eat more if you like it. You're too skinny. How am I thin? You're obviously the same. You haven't lost any weight. You didn't lose weight? But why do I look thinner? His burning gaze stared at her flat chest, his handsome and resolute face carrying a trace of ridicule. Fengjiu raised his eyes and met his gaze. He couldn't help but spit. What are you looking at? Chapter 1271. Not long after, one of the kitchen staff carried a small table to Xinyuan Moses Fengjiu's table. Your Highness, this is the last dish. It's the golden crispy skin roll. The manager said from the side. Roast duck? Fengjiu was startled. Looking at the golden roast duck and the side dishes, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This is the three-colored spirit duck, the signature dish here. Look, this spirit duck only has a thin layer of meat on its skin. The skin is crispy and juicy, fat but not greasy. It is fragrant and has a unique taste. Xinyuan Mose said, and a smile appeared in his eyes because he saw the person sitting across from him had a greedy expression. Fengjiu stared at the knife in the chef's hand. She watched as he cut the duck's skin with a few strokes. Each layer of skin only had a thin layer of meat. In fact, she really wanted to say that she had eaten this before, but the taste was probably different. Please enjoy. He folded the golden crispy skin roll into a plate and placed it in front of the two of them. After adding some sauce, he retreated. Xinyuan Mose picked up a piece for her. Try it. You should eat too. Don't just watch me eat. You haven't eaten much yourself. She also picked up a piece for him as she spoke. All right, he replied and ate with her. Seeing her eat happily, his heart was also satisfied. After the two of them finished eating, they drank a cup of tea to calm down. Only then did they walk around the city together. At the same time, in the imperial palace, the king already knew that Xinyuan Mose did not accompany the Qishui's third princess and instead accompanied a manservant for a stroll outside. Who is that manservant? He asked in a low voice as he stared at the hidden guard below. It is said that he is the distant nephew of the steward of the palace's outer courtyard. He has only been in the palace for a few days, but His Highness is very fond of him. The hidden guard reported. An unrelated person can make him condescend to accompany him out to play, eat, and drink? Investigate. Find out the background of that person for this emperor. Yes. The hidden guard replied and quickly left. In the evening, Yang Yong, who had returned to his residence, went to the main courtyard. Master. He bowed, glanced at Fengjiu, and nodded slightly. Fengjiu also returned the gesture. Seeing that they had something to talk about, he said, I'll go out for a walk first. You guys talk. When Xinyuan Mo saw this, he didn't stop her. Instead, he looked at Yang Yong and asked, What's the matter? There's a secret letter from the palace saying that the monarch is furious. Hearing this, Xinyuan Mose raised his eyebrows and looked at him, waiting for him to continue. The monarch knows that master did not accompany the Qishui third young master, but accompanied a manservant out to play and eat. He is very unhappy. I am worried. He was worried that the monarch would make a move on Ghost Dr. Fengjiu because his identity was unknown. Moreover, the monarch has just sent someone to summon master to the palace. Hearing this, Xinyuan Mose's deep black eyes flashed with a faint light and said, Amen. Have someone prepare a carriage. This emperor is also about to enter the palace to explain things to him, in case he really plans to use this emperor to form a marriage alliance with Qishui. Yang Yong hesitated for a moment and said, Master, although the ghost doctor's identity is the princess of the Phoenix dynasty, the difference in strength between a sixth-ranked country and the 8 great empires is not just a little bit. The monarch is also a person who places great importance on family. I'm afraid that he will not easily acknowledge the ghost doctor. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his deep voice carried a dignified tone. This emperor's woman, this emperor's approval is enough. Why does she need someone else's approval? Since that manservant is your savior, bring him to the palace some other day and let me see him." "All right," he replied. Then he bowed and turned to leave. Seeing him leave, the monarch's eyes flashed. He waved his hand, and two men in black appeared from the shadows. "Keep an eye on him. If that manservant goes hunting in the Juchong Mountain, test him for me." "Yes," the two men in black replied, and retreated in a flash. Even their breaths were completely concealed. Back in the residence, Xinyuan Mose went to see Fengjiu, and then went with her to the north courtyard. "How much did you drug him?" he asked as he walked. Chapter 1273. I think you should pay more attention. It would be best if you could leave a deep impression on him. There was a hint of a smile in his deep voice. He held her hand and said, "My father said that we'll go hunting in 2 days. I'll lead the team and bring the two of them to play. I think that if he can't get out of bed by then, this matter can be avoided." "Hunting? I want to go too," she said excitedly. "After all, he's the crown prince of Chishui province. I can't let him stay in bed forever. This is enough. Anyway, I've vented all my anger. If he dares to touch me again, it won't be too late for me to teach him a lesson." This Prince Chishui is an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. His cultivation was cultivated by accumulating a pile of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Your cultivation has also entered the nascent soul realm. However, the difference is that you relied on yourself to become a nascent soul cultivator. In terms of fighting strength, I believe that you won't lose to him. Hearing this, she said, "After I came here, I found that there are many nascent soul cultivators. Some of them are only shopkeepers in some treasure shops. You have to know, that kind of strength is already at the level of an ancestor where we come from. Even the waiters in the restaurants and inns have foundation establishment cultivation. Every place is the same. There are strong and weak people. Here, people who are too weak can't survive. Here, even ordinary people have spiritual masters. However, spiritual masters are too weak here. They can't even compare to foundation establishment cultivators. They can only do the most menial tasks." As Xinyuan Mo spoke, he saw that they were about to reach the northern courtyard. He stopped and looked at Fengjiu beside him and said, "My father asked about you today. I only said that you saved my life. He asked me to bring you to the palace some other day." As he spoke, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Even though he didn't say anything, I can still feel a trace of killing intent from him. Therefore, I don't plan to bring you to see him now." Hearing this, her eyes flashed and she smiled. "Don't worry. Since I've decided on you, I won't change my mind for any other reason. Even if your imperial father stops me, I'll make him nod his head in affirmation one day." She smiled and said, "It's right in front. Let's go." "Yes." The corners of his lips curled up slightly. His deep gaze carried a touch of gentleness as he moved away from her and walked towards the northern courtyard. When Princess Shui saw Xinyuan Mose come to the northern courtyard to visit her brother, the crown prince, she was a little surprised. However, she still bowed and invited him into the courtyard. When she was about to enter the room, she saw the servant by Xinyuan Mose's side, and she was a little unhappy. It was him again. This young man was clearly wearing the clothes of a manservant, but there wasn't the slightest bit of humility from head to toe. He also didn't know what respect was. People who didn't know him would think that he was some kind of big shot. He didn't even greet her when he entered the room. He just ignored her, a princess, and followed Crown Prince Xinyuan into the room. She remembered that her brother only acted strangely after he made a move on this young man. She couldn't help but guess that her brother's current state was because of this young man. Is Prince Chishui feeling better? In the room, Xinyuan Mose came to the bedside and looked at the extremely weak figure lying on the bed. Chapter 1274. That's good. Xinyuan Mose nodded. He looked at the pale-faced Prince Chishui and said, "The 9-tier mountain is the royal hunting forest. I would like to invite the two of you to go hunting in 2 days. Would you be interested?" Princess Shui was slightly startled and hesitated. Hunting? Would her brother be able to go hunting in 2 days with his current condition? Although she was worried, she did not dare to reject. Therefore, she looked at her brother who was lying on the bed. Since Crown Prince Xianyuan has invited me, I will naturally go with you, Prince Qishui said as he gestured to the guards beside the bed to help him up. After he sat down on the bed, he looked at Fengjiu, who was wearing a servant's uniform beside Xianyuan Mo's, and said, "May I know who this person is?" Xianyuan Mo's glanced at Fengjiu beside him and said, "She is my attendant." "So she is an attendant. Would your highness be willing to part with her? I am willing to use 10 chests of treasures to exchange for your servant." His gaze was fixed on Fengjiu because he was sure that the servant was the reason why he was lying here and speaking weakly. Hearing his words, Xianyuan Mo's face darkened, and the aura around his body became oppressive. He was like a lion about to fly into a rage. His deep and sharp eyes stared coldly at the Qishui crown prince, and he released all of his might. Not only was the Qishui crown prince's weak body unable to withstand it, but the atmosphere in the room also became oppressive. The air seemed to have condensed, and even breathing became difficult. Due to the strong pressure spreading in the room, 2 gray-clothed middle-aged men beside the crown prince of Qishui province walked out and blocked the side of the bed. They blocked the pressure for the pale-faced Prince Qishui and protected the chaotic qi and blood in his body. "Prince Qishui, you better think twice before you speak next time." Xianyuan Mo stared at him coldly and said, "Not everyone can covet the people around me." Prince Qishui's expression changed slightly when he heard this. His words could make Prince Qishui react like this. It was obvious that this person was not as simple as a servant or a confidant. Prince Qishui could hear the man's strong and domineering possessiveness in his tone. "Your Highness, my brother didn't mean it that way," Princess Shui said to ease the atmosphere. "He was just joking." However, Prince Qishui laughed and said, "No, I wasn't joking. I'm really interested in this servant. However, since your highness is unwilling to part with him, then so be it. I've heard that there are many capable people around Prince Xianyuan, but I didn't expect to be lucky enough to experience them." His gaze landed on Fengjiu, who was standing quietly at the side. Wasn't it because he fell for Fengjiu's trick that he ended up in such a sorry state? Xianyuan Mo stood with his hands behind his back. He frowned slightly and was slightly displeased. This was because he saw Prince Qishui staring straight at his woman. Even though Fengjiu was wearing a servant's uniform, he still felt that this man was an eyesore when he saw him staring at his woman like that. "Since Prince Qishui is fine, then I'll return. 2 days later, I'll wait for the 2 of you to go hunting in the 9 mountains." He walked out as soon as he finished speaking. Seeing this, Fengjiu also left. Soon, they left the north courtyard and went to the main courtyard. Chapter 1275. "It's fine, it's just a hunt." His eyes darkened as he spoke, staring in the direction that the 2 people had left in. In the evening, after dinner, the 2 of them sat across from each other. Xianyuan Mo's looked at Fengjiu sitting across from him. Staring at her servant's clothes, he asked with a smile, "Didn't you say that you would stay here for a few more months? Are you planning on staying by my side dressed like this? Aren't you going to wash off the disguise on your face?" Fengjiu rested her chin on her hands and looked at him with a smile. "Then what do you want to see me like? Wearing women's clothes?" Seeing the faint expectation in his eyes, she laughed and said, "You really want to see me in women's clothes?" Being stared at and teased by her, Xianyuan Mo's ears turned red and his face became a bit uncomfortable. He looked away and coughed. "You look very beautiful in women's clothes. So you're saying that I don't look good in men's clothes?" Her eyes were full of smiles as she looked at the man with red ears. That's right, that's right. How could she forget that this man was a cold and arrogant man? Thinking of how she looked like in men's clothes, he stared at her and said, "Men's clothes are handsome and evil. Women's clothes? How about women's clothes?" She tilted her head and asked. The man opposite her had a pair of deep black eyes that shone like the stars in the night sky. He stared at her and said, "Women's clothing, enchanting and moving." She who had changed into a red dress was indeed incomparably beautiful, enchanting and moving. Even when he saw her, he couldn't help his heart beating fast and couldn't look away. However, She rarely wore women's clothes, and her enchanting and evil appearance in women's clothes was even rarer. Every time he thought of how she had intentionally seduced him, his body would become restless. In the past, he had rarely been aroused. Even if he was aroused, it would be suppressed by the 1,000-year cold chi in his body. However, ever since the cold chi was dispelled, coupled with the fact that he had cultivated an extremely masculine cultivation method, and now that she was by his side, it was a test for him. Fengju looked at him and couldn't help but feel amused. A woman would doll herself up for her lover. Logically speaking, now that she had come to his side, she shouldn't be wearing a manservant's uniform with a face that he didn't recognize. At first, she didn't think much about it and thought that it was fine. However, after hearing his words and seeing his expectant expression, her eyes turned slyly. She took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "But I like to wear men's clothes. What should I do?" Hearing this, he looked at her, his gaze moving from her smiling face to her chest. He frowned slightly, as if he was troubled. "Wearing men's clothes all the time won't help you develop well." Puff. Ha 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 ha. Fengjiu burst out laughing. Chapter 1276. What did they say about being handsome in men's clothing and enchanting in women's clothing? Forgive them for not being able to tell. In the courtyard, the two people who were talking in the courtyard were startled when they heard the hidden guards unable to hold back their laughter. That's right, they had only cared about themselves and had forgotten that there were hidden guards here. Thinking about how the hidden guards had overheard their meaningless conversation, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes as she stared at the uneasy man. AI, this arrogant and coquettish man was so cute. She couldn't help but want to tease him a little. What should she do? Xinyuan Mo's voice suddenly sounded. His deep gaze swept across the surroundings. Retreat 10 meters away. Block your ears if you're not supposed to hear. When his voice fell, Fengjiu saw that there were faint sounds coming from several places. It was obvious that the hidden guards had retreated. I don't mind them eavesdropping. Xinyuan Mo glanced at her and said, "All right, let's not talk anymore. This lord is going to take a bath." He stood up and ordered the people outside to prepare water for a bath. Fengjiu's eyes lit up. "Ah, take a bath? Do you want me to help you take a bath?" "No need," he said unhappily. This woman, she was deliberately trying to anger him. Seeing him turn around to glare at her and then walk inside, her gaze turned and she said with a smile, "How about we take a bath together?" When her voice fell, the man who was about to step onto the stairs in the courtyard tripped and his footsteps faltered. "AI, be careful. Don't get too excited. If you fall, it will damage your dignified and mighty image," she said while holding back her laughter. A certain someone turned around. His tense face was dyed with a faint blush, and his expression was awkward and embarrassed. He looked at the woman who was holding back her laughter and immediately strode back. While she was still in shock, he picked her up and walked into the room. What are you doing?" Fengjiu was caught off guard and carried horizontally into the room. Fengjiu couldn't help but be startled and hurriedly held onto him to prevent him from falling. Xinyuan Mo saw her panicked look and finally smiled with satisfaction. He snorted. "Didn't you say you would help Binjun bathe? You still want to bathe with this lord? What were they waiting for? Come over now." Don't do it. Okay? I was just joking," she said embarrassedly. If they really took a bath together, she was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist turning into a wolf. "Really? This monarch is not joking," he scoffed. After entering the room, he carried her to the bed and pressed her down. Staring at the woman trapped under his body, he was in a good mood. He felt as if his heart was flying. He teased her just like how she had teased him before. With a serious expression, he said, "How about this? This monarch will help you bathe." Fengjiu's lips twitched. He felt like he had smashed his own foot with a rock. "That's not good." She wrapped her hands around his neck, but her expression was serious. "What's not good?" he asked with a smile. "We haven't gotten married yet. That's crossing the line. We need to be polite." You're right." He nodded in agreement. Seeing her expression relax, he thought for a bit and said, "But this monarch is the man you're engaged to, your fiancé. Tell me, shouldn't I ask for some benefits of being a fiancé?" Chapter 1277. His gaze became deep and dark, his throat unconsciously moving as he stared at the woman smiling like a flower. He curled his lips. No, it should be like this. As soon as his voice fell, he leaned down, burying his head in her neck and bit down. Ah, so ticklish, ha. Fangju let out a low cry, shrinking her neck. Then she laughed out loud, pushing him away. Who knew that the man saw that she was ticklish and directly tickled her. Ah, ha. Don't play ha. Don't play ha 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 ha. Uncontrollable laughter came from the room, accompanied by pleas for mercy. Hearing this, the shadow guards who had retreated 10 meters away looked at each other and grinned. Hui Lang and Ying Yi, who were walking, overheard the laughter coming from the room in the courtyard. They couldn't help but stop in their tracks, especially Hui Lang. His face was full of curiosity, as if he wanted to sneak a peek, and he really couldn't help but walk forward. Ying Yi, who was behind him, rolled his eyes speechlessly and quickly reached out to pull him back, asking in a low voice, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to take a look." Hui Lang turned back and said matter-of-factly, "What are you looking for? Didn't you hear that it's Master and the other two inside?" Hui Lang grinned, saying, "I heard, but look at how they're laughing. I don't know what they're doing inside. I'm just going to take a peek." "Heh, Master won't know." "Master won't know? All right then. You go. If anything happens, don't look for me." He withdrew his hand and didn't pull him back. He crossed his arms and retreated to a tree not far away, leaning against it to watch. This idiot, Master and the ghost doctor were cultivating their relationship inside, and he wanted to see? Then let's go see. He didn't believe that Master wouldn't find out. "Chi, Ying Yi, you're too timid. This won't do." "It's fine. You just wait here. I'll sneak over to take a look and then come back to tell you." He turned back and said to Ying Yi. Then he walked lightly and crept forward step by step. When he came to the corner of the room, he pressed his ear against the wall and listened for a while. Then he quietly opened the window, intending to take a peek inside. "Ha ha 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 ha. Don't. I can't. Ha 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 ha." In the room, Fangju was tickled by his hands. He laughed so hard that he couldn't catch his breath and begged for mercy. This was the first time she knew that this usually serious and cold man actually knew how to tickle people. She laughed to death. "Do you still dare to do it next time?" He stopped and looked at her with a smile in his deep black eyes. "No, I wouldn't dare. I really wouldn't dare." With great difficulty, she finally managed to catch her breath and hurriedly promised. As she spoke, the two of them were startled because they heard a faint sound. Thus, after looking at each other, they both looked towards the window at the same time. Xinyuan Mose picked up a pillow from the bed. When he saw a head pop out of the window, he threw the pillow at it. Bang! Ah! Hui Lang cried out in alarm and hurriedly shrank back. He only heard the heavy sound of that thing hitting the window, scaring him so much that he wanted to scramble out. However, before he could leave the courtyard, the door opened and a familiar voice filled with anger sounded. "Stop right there for Bin Jun." Chapter 1278. Hee, Master. I hope I didn't disturb you? He turned around and smiled awkwardly, looking at him fawningly. But when he saw his master's dark expression and the pressure he was emitting, he felt his scalp go numb. Fangju leaned against the door and looked at Hui Lang with her arms crossed. She knew it was this idiot. If it was a normal person, they wouldn't do something like peeping. All right. Although she had peeped before, she was an exception. Ying Yi, this subordinate is here. Ying Yi stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Xinyuan Mose glanced at Hui Lang and said, "Hang him upside down under the tree in the front yard and hit his laughing acupoint. Let him laugh until dawn." Hui Lang's eyes widened and he quickly begged for mercy. "Master, don't. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so curious to see what you were doing inside. But I really didn't see anything. Really, I really didn't see anything." Fengjiu's mouth twitched. She raised her head and looked at the sky. This clown. Take him away. Xinyuan Mose waved his hand. Yes. Ingi responded and stepped forward to drag Hui Lang away. Master, master, he cried out miserably, but he didn't dare to open his mouth to beg the ghost doctor for mercy. After all, her identity was a secret, and only the few of them by his master's side knew. If he shouted out, wouldn't everyone in the manor know? Thus, Hui Lang was hung upside down in the front yard where people were coming and going. He couldn't stop laughing there. As for the courtyard, Fengjiu saw that only the two of them were left. She smiled and said, "The night is perfect. I'll go out for a walk." She quickly rushed out. Xinyuan Mose raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Don't come back too late." Hearing the words behind her, Fengjiu almost stumbled and fell to the ground. She steadied herself and looked back. She heard his voice again. "I asked the kitchen to stew some bird nest for you to nourish your body." Hearing this, she blinked her eyes and revealed a joyful smile. "Got it." As she spoke, she waved her hand and flashed out. While Xinyuan Mose was taking a bath, Fengjiu went to the front yard. She saw the figure hanging upside down from the tree, trembling with laughter. When she saw Hui Lang, she walked over. "Hui Lang, how does it feel to hang upside down and enjoy the night breeze?" She sat down on a rock and looked at the laughing Hui Lang. "No, ha ha ha, no, ha ha ha, not good, ha ha ha." He was laughing so hard that he was about to cry. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so curious as to sneak a peek. It would have been fine if he had really seen something, but he had been hung here without seeing anything. He felt so wronged. How can it not be good? I think it's pretty good. Look, it's windy here, and there's a night view to enjoy. No one will disturb you. It can't be any better. She supported her chin with one hand and smiled with her eyes narrowed. Chapter 1279. She smiled as she watched his face turn pale after hearing her words. She comforted him. "Don't be nervous, I was just saying. I'll do it next time. Ha ha ha. I won't dare to do it next time. Ha 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 ha." Hui Lang hurriedly expressed his stance. Even if you beat him to death, he would never dare to peek at them again. Luckily, it was his master who punished him today. If it was the ghost doctor, then he would really be in for a tragedy. Moreover, he didn't know her and was just saying it casually. It was just that he hadn't seen her for a long time, so he had almost forgotten that he had suffered a lot at her hands. Fengjiu chatted with Hui Lang for a while. All right. Most of the time, it was her talking while Hui Lang laughed. Only when she estimated that Xinyuan Mose should have finished bathing did she stand up and say to Hui Lang, "All right, I won't accompany you anymore. You can laugh here slowly, but don't laugh so scary. It's so late at night. If you laugh so loudly and hoarsely, it'll really scare people." As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her hand and walked towards the main courtyard while Hui Lang couldn't stop laughing. When she returned to the main courtyard, she saw a certain person sitting at the head of the bed in his underwear reading a book. Seeing her come in, he raised his eyes and glanced over. "You're back? The bird's nest is on the table. Quickly eat it while it's hot." Fengjiu looked at the table and saw a stew pot and a small bowl. She asked, "Have you eaten?" "I don't really like this. You eat it." He flipped through the book in his hand and didn't even raise his head as he spoke. Seeing this, Fengjiu sat down at the table and scooped up a bowl to eat. Compared to normal bird's nest, this bloodbird's nest was more nourishing and nutritious. The taste of the egg white was also very strong, and the texture was very smooth. Xinyuan Mose said he didn't want to eat, so she ate it herself. Bird's nest didn't have any effect on men, so this kind of bird's nest was only suitable for women. "What book are you reading?" She glanced inside and asked. What book was this guy sitting on the bed reading? Was he so engrossed in it? When Xinyuan Mose heard this, his hand paused in the middle of flipping through the book. He glanced outside to make sure that she couldn't see him, then cleared his throat and said, "It's a Tao Te Ching." Even he felt a little embarrassed to lie through his teeth, and his expression became a little uncomfortable. After estimating that she would finish eating, he closed the book. The cover was indeed a copy of the Tao Te Ching. As for whether the content inside was the Tao Te Ching or not, Only he knew. She watched as he closed the book and stuffed it under the pillow. Only then did he get up and walk out. He came to the table and sat down. Seeing that she had finished the stew, he said, "Tomorrow night, I'll ask the kitchen to stew some cordyceps soup for you. Take turns to eat. If I eat like this every day, how will I become fat?" She put down the bowl and asked with a smile. Hearing this, he looked at her thoughtfully. "I heard that it feels better when you're fatter." Fengjiu rolled her eyes. As expected of a man, his way of thinking was different from a woman's. "It's getting late. I'll go back first. See you tomorrow." She stood up and said. She planned to go back to take a bath and have a comfortable sleep. She thought about what he said earlier and thought about how to give him a surprise. Go back and sleep early." He nodded and didn't ask her to stay because they were in the same courtyard. After sending her out, he went back to bed to rest. Chapter 1280. 2 days later, Prince Qishui, who had finally recovered, and the third princess came to the front courtyard. Today was the day of the hunt, and they wanted to take advantage of the hunting opportunity to see how skilled Crown Prince Xinyuan was. Early in the morning, the people accompanying them were already waiting outside the residence, while they waited inside for Xinyuan Mo's. It wasn't until about an hour later that the black figure finally arrived. The servant was still following behind him, causing the two of them to squint their eyes. "Sorry to have kept you waiting." As Xinyuan Mo spoke, he glanced at the two of them and said in a low voice, "This round trip should take 3 days. Are Prince Qishui and Princess ready?" Prince Qishui replied, his gaze falling on Xinyuan Mo's. "We are also people who often go out to train, so it's easy for us to travel. Even our clothes are changed into hunting clothes, and we're only waiting for Crown Prince Xinyuan." "Since that's the case, then please. The horses have already been prepared." Hearing this, the two of them walked out of the residence and jumped onto the horses that had been prepared. Xinyuan Mo's walked out from behind, and Ying Yi led a black horse over. He did not immediately jump onto the horse, but glanced at Fengjiu beside him. "I'll ride this one." Fengjiu smiled and pointed at the white horse that Yang Yong had led over. "Stay by my side and don't stray too far," he said in a low voice, then jumped onto the horse and sat on its back, looking at her standing below. "Okay," Fengjiu replied. After taking the horse that Yang Yong had led over, she also did a beautiful flip, straddling the horse and following beside him. Prince Qishui saw this, and his gaze fell on the young man in the servant's clothes again. After sizing him up, he looked away. Behind them, Ying Yi and Hui Lang accompanied them, as well as a group of guards from the mansion. There were only 20 to 30 people on their side, while Prince Qishui's side also had 20 to 30 people. In total, there were 50 to 60 people forming a large group and heading towards the 9th mountain. Yang Yong, who had stayed behind to guard the residence, watched them leave before turning around to return to the residence. They also arrived at the imperial city. They spurred their horses and galloped all the way. In less than half a day, they arrived at the 9th mountain. The 9-layer mountain was divided into 9 layers. It was said to be the royal hunting forest, but because it covered a vast area, even the royal family members couldn't explore all of it every time they came here to hunt. Inside, besides some ferocious beasts, there were also ferocious beasts and spirit beasts. When they arrived at the outskirts of the 9th mountain, Xinyuan Mo's looked at Prince Qishui and said in a deep voice, "With the strength of the two of you, this place is not a dangerous place. Each of us will bring 10 people in. Everyone else, stay outside." "Sure." As Prince Qishui spoke, he arranged for 10 people to follow the two of them into the forest, while the others stood guard in the surroundings. On the other side, Xinyuan Mo's group did the same. Apart from Hui Lang, Ying Yi, and Fengjiu, there were 7 other guards following them. "Try not to run to the 3rd mountain. We'll meet up outside the forest when it's dark," Xinyuan Mo's reminded. "Don't worry, we've heard a little about the 9th mountain and know what kind of place it is." Prince Qishui snorted. He clamped his legs together and waved his horsewhip. With a low shout, he got off his horse and galloped out. The people behind him quickly followed. Chapter 1281. Hearing this, Hui Lang and Yi couldn't help but glance at Fengjiu. Fengjiu pretended not to hear anything and looked around. He was chewing on a dog's tail grass that he picked from somewhere, looking indifferent. Xinyuan Mose glanced at Princess Ing Shui and didn't say anything. Instead, he said to Fengjiu behind him, "Follow him." Then, he urged his horse into the forest. Seeing this, Princess Ing Shui glanced at the undisciplined young man. Then, she urged her horse to follow Xinyuan Mose. Fengjiu glanced at the two people in front of him and snorted heavily. Humph! Ing Yi signaled to Hui Lang and urged his horse to follow his master, leaving Hui Lang to follow Fengjiu. Seeing that they had left, Hui Lang went forward and flattered, "Ghost Doctor, don't blame her. Princess Ing Shui didn't know you were a woman. If she knew that you were a woman and that there was a peerless beauty like you by Master's side, she would be too embarrassed to appear in front of you." Fengjiu glanced at him and said, "Why don't you follow your master? Why are you following me?" "Hee, Ing Yi is with Master, so I'll just follow the Ghost Doctor. Besides, following the Ghost Lord is so much better than following Master. Besides, I haven't thanked you for giving me that medicinal liquid. That medicinal liquid of yours is really miraculous. After drinking a bottle, my voice isn't hoarse anymore." He looked at her fawningly. He knew that he couldn't offend her. Besides, following her would sometimes bring him benefits. He was happy to follow her. "Okay, let's go. Let's go and see how that woman is pestering your master." She squeezed the horse's belly with her legs and chased after them. Hui Lang grinned and said, "Don't worry. My master doesn't like her anyway." When Fengjiu heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Only then did he smile. Not long after, Murong Xinyuan pulled his bow and aimed at a sika deer that only revealed half of its body behind a tree. He pulled the bowstring, loosened his grip, and released the arrow. Shoo! The arrow flew out. The sharp blade sliced through the air, accurately piercing the neck of the sika deer. With a hiss, the sika deer fell to the ground with a bang. Fengjiu's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to clap and cheer, she heard a woman's voice in front of her. "Good. Your Highness has good archery skills." Princess Ing Shui's eyes were filled with adoration as she looked at the man in the black robe. Even though he had mercilessly rejected her, so what if he rejected such an outstanding man? She still couldn't stop her heart from throbbing for him. She still couldn't stop her love for him. Fengjiu pursed his lips. This woman was staring at her man. Even though she was rejected, she still kept going forward. Her skin was really thick. A guard dismounted from his horse and quickly walked forward. He carried the sika deer out and put it into his chinkuan bag. Xinyuan Mose, on the other hand, turned around after putting away his arrow. His gaze swept past the people behind him and landed on a certain woman sitting at the very back with her lips curled up. A hint of a smile involuntarily flashed across his deep, dark eyes. He pulled the horse back and walked past the crowd. Under Princess Ing Shui's aggrieved gaze, he arrived in front of Fengjiu. "What animal do you want? I'll hunt it for you." Chapter 1282. Crown Prince Xinyuan, he's just a servant. Princess Ing Shui could not help but say. Hearing this, Xinyuan Mose's eyes turned cold and his face darkened. He glanced at her and said in a cold voice, "Princess Ing Shui, you seem to have forgotten that you're just a guest." I thought she bit her lips. She was a little angry and resentful, but she could not do anything to him. She could only stare at Fengjiu with a warning look. "Princess Ing Shui, why are you looking at me? Don't you want to go hunting? Do you not know how to hunt without our crown prince?" Fengjiu asked casually. He raised his chin slightly and looked at her provocatively. She dared to target her man. It was already good that she did not kill her immediately. "I want to eat roasted wild boar meat. Let's hunt a wild boar. We'll roast it tonight." She looked at Xinyuan Mose, who was sitting on a horse beside her, and said with a smile. She had completely forgotten that she was still a servant. "Okay," Xinyuan Mose replied. He reined in the reins and turned towards the forest. Seeing this, Fengjiu and the others also followed. Princess Ing Shui had no choice but to suppress the resentment in her heart and follow them. She did not believe that Crown Prince Xinyuan would not be captivated by her beauty. Men always paid attention to their appearance. There was no man who was not lustful. She did not believe that she could not capture him. As they went deeper into the forest, they saw more and more beasts. Some of them even attacked them before they could even shoot the arrows in their hands. After a few hours, regardless of whether it was Prince Qishui or Xinyuan Mo's, they had hunted a lot of prey. After riding for a few hours in the forest, Fengjie was tired. Seeing that they were going forward in high spirits, she slowed down and wanted to find a place to sit down and rest. While she was thinking, she suddenly heard a gust of wind and a sharp qi shooting towards her. There was only Grey Wolf by her side. However, at this moment, Grey Wolf was still a meter away from her. When Grey Wolf heard the sound of wind breaking, he turned around and couldn't help but be startled. He hurriedly warned her, "Be careful." The moment Fengjie finished speaking, she turned around and saw a sharp arrow shooting towards her. She could not dodge it. Therefore, she clamped her legs on the horse and lay down on the back of the horse. She dodged the arrow. Swoosh! The arrow shot past her body and into a tree in the distance. The arrowhead pierced deeply into the tree, and the feathers at the end of the arrow trembled slightly. Fengjie clamped her legs on the horse's abdomen and exerted some strength in her waist. She sat up again. She looked at Prince Qishui in front of her with a cold gaze. "I'm so sorry. I accidentally mistook you for prey," Prince Qishui said without any sincerity. He handed the arrow in his hand to the guard beside him and rode out of the forest. Hui Lang stared at the group of people riding out with anger in his eyes. He did not hold back and sneered. "She's so old and yet she mistook Prince Qishui for prey." Those who didn't know better would think that Prince Qishui was 70 or 80 years old. Only the heavens knew that he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest when he saw that scene. If something happened to the ghost doctor under his protection, then he did not need to live anymore. Chapter 1283. It doesn't matter. I don't think Prince Qishui did it on purpose. Fengjie smiled and motioned for Hui Lang to calm down. He looked at Prince Qishui and said, "If Prince Qishui wanted to take my life, then he wouldn't have missed." Hearing this, Prince Qishui's eyes flashed. Did he miss? That arrow was clearly aimed at his heart. If it weren't for the fact that Xinyuan Mo's was in the forest and Hui Lang was by his side, he would have ordered the people behind him to kill him to vent his anger. Seeing that Fengjie didn't care about it, Hui Lang didn't say anything else. He just kept his guard up when he saw them coming. Xiao Lizi, Prince Qishui rode his horse to Fengjie's front. His feminine gaze was fixed on the youth dressed in servant's clothing.
Yes.
Fengjie nodded in response. "This is the first time I've seen a servant like you. Compared to hunting, I'm more curious about your strength. Why don't I let my people spar with you?" As he spoke, Prince Qishui waved his hand and motioned for a middle-aged man dressed in gray to come forward. "Don't go too far. My master is nearby. If he sees you bullying people here, you'll suffer," Hui Lang said vigilantly. He rode his horse to block Fengjie's path and said in a low voice, "You leave first. They're targeting you." Fengjie glanced at the people behind Prince Qishui and said with some distress, "This isn't good, right? No matter how I look at it, I'm the one at a disadvantage. Moreover, you're guests. It's not good to fight with guests. It's too impolite and unruly." Prince Qishui sneered, his feminine gaze landing on Fengjie. "You only have this much guts?" As soon as he finished speaking, he gestured, and the gray-robed middle-aged men all leaped up and attacked Fengjie. I'm quite timid, but since you guys want to play, I can only accompany you. After all, today is mainly for you to enjoy yourselves to the fullest. If you feel that the hunt is boring, you can change to someone else to compete with you. Perhaps it will be more satisfying." The corners of her mouth curled up and she revealed an evil smile. Seeing the gray-robed middle-aged man gather spirit force in his hands, she also gathered spirit force in her hands. She jumped off the horse and waved her hands, exchanging blows with the man in the air. On the side, Hui Lang's expression became serious. That gray-robed middle-aged man's strength had already reached the nascent soul stage. Could she deal with Fengjiu? Just as he was thinking about it, he saw that the two people in the air had already exchanged more than a dozen blows. As the spiritual power pressure surged, the aura in the air became more and more oppressive. The wind from their palms whistled in the air, and it was as sharp as a knife. Even though the two of them didn't use any weapons, the sound of the sharp airflow was not inferior to that of a sword in hand. In just a short while, Feng Nine kicked the middle-aged man down from above. That person was pushed into the air by a force. As he staggered and fell, he saw the manservant appear beside him in an instant. The manservant grinned at him. While he was stunned, he saw the manservant dash forward and snatch the Chinkuan bag from his waist at an extremely fast speed. She nodded and let him lead her past the crowd to a tree not far away to rest. Hui Lang and the others quickly prepared the game and prepared to roast the meat. Prince Qishui saw this scene with his own eyes and was slightly surprised. It was said that Crown Prince Xianyuan didn't get close to women. Could it be that he was gay? When he thought of this, he looked at the two figures with great interest and asked, "Ing Shui, have you confirmed his sexual orientation? Could such a person be gay?" Chapter 1285. Princess Ing Shui couldn't help but bite her lower lip. She lowered her head and said, "He doesn't allow me to get close to him and is extremely cold to me." Her heart wavered when she saw how he treated the servant. Could this person really be he? If Crown Prince Xianyuan is really a homosexual, then this will be really interesting. He chuckled as he stared at the two people. He ordered his men to prepare the roasted meat as he walked over. In the dark, the two men sent by the monarch had witnessed the previous scene. They were slightly surprised. It seemed that the young man's skills were not bad. He was able to suppress the opponent's strength so easily that they didn't dare to underestimate him. It seemed that they didn't need to make a move to answer to the monarch. I've heard that Crown Prince Xuanyuan's skills are extraordinary. Today, I would like to meet Crown Prince Xianyuan. Prince Qishui didn't give Xianyuan Mo's a chance to refuse and immediately attacked him. Seeing this, Xianyuan Mo's men instantly stood up. However, they retreated when Prince Qishui waved his hand. "Since that's the case, I'll accompany you to the end," Xianyuan Mo said in a deep voice. His black figure instantly dashed out. He raised his hand, and a powerful aura suddenly attacked Prince Qishui. Prince Qishui dodged to the side when he saw Prince Qishui's speed. However, his opponent's speed was too fast. His robe was still torn by the sharp aura. He glanced at the torn sleeve on his arm and sneered. In the next moment, his body moved like a whirlwind and attacked with a sharp aura. The two figures fought from the ground to midair. A powerful aura spread out, and the sharp aura whistled through the air like a sharp blade. It cut down the surrounding trees and scattered them to the ground. Fengjiu was slightly surprised when he saw this. It seemed that Prince Qishui's skills were very strong. To be able to exchange so many blows with Xianyuan Mo's, it could be seen that his reputation was not undeserved. As the crown prince of a country, he should indeed have such skills. Not long after, the crowd saw that the gap in strength between the two was gradually widening. Crown Prince Xianyuan was becoming more and more courageous as he fought, while Prince Qishui was running out of spiritual energy and couldn't keep up. Seeing this, everyone knew that this contest was about to come to an end. The people of Qishui were not worried that Crown Prince Xianyuan would kill their crown prince. After all, the relationship between the two countries was not allowed to fall out because of small fights. The two of them should stop after the winner was decided. When they thought of this, they waited quietly, waiting for them to stop. However, no one had expected that just as Prince Qishui's figure retreated from the air after being struck, he would reveal a feminine smile after seeing Xianyuan Mo's. He suddenly turned around and attacked Fengjiu, who was not far behind him. He did not make a move to hurt anyone. He just wanted to confirm something. Fengjiu was watching the two of them fight. He never thought that Prince Qishui would suddenly attack him in front of so many people. As a result, He was caught off guard and was unable to avoid the hand that was aimed at her chest. He could only move his body slightly to the side to avoid it. She saw his hand grab her shoulder. Because he was fast and had no killing intent, she was unable to react in time and was forced to take 2 steps back. The sound of clothes being torn could be heard. Impudent. Chapter 1286. His voice was like thunder, deafening, but it couldn't stop him from tearing off Feng Ju's sleeve. He tore it all the way down from her shoulder, revealing her snow-white and slender arm. It also revealed the dazzling red chastity mark on her arm. Almost at that moment, everyone was stunned, shocked, and stunned. No one had expected that this young servant was actually a woman. Chastity sand was something that only pure women would have. If it was a young man, how could there be such a thing on the arm? For a moment, everyone had different expressions. Aside from Grey Wolf and Ing Yi, who knew about Feng Jia's identity as the ghost doctor, the others only knew that this servant was a woman, and that she had an extraordinary relationship with their master. They even thought that since this woman was able to stay by their master's side, and their master doted on her so much, she should have long been one of their master's people. They never thought that she was actually a pure and innocent woman. Thinking of their master's self-control, they could not help but worry. Was their master really fine in that aspect? Otherwise, how could he keep a woman by his side and let her remain a pure woman? Furthermore, their master had such a noble status, it was normal for him to want a woman. However, he let his daughter remain a pure woman. This they could not be blamed for thinking too much. Compared to the people on Xinyuan Mo's side, the people on Qishui Province's side were shocked and astonished. Especially Princess Ing Shui, who stared at the servant's exposed arm with anger and jealousy. Servant? What servant? It was clearly a woman, and a woman who was well protected by Crown Prince Xinyuan. She stared at the woman's face with jealousy, as if she wanted to see a flower on her face. This woman was in disguise. Without a doubt, this face was definitely not hers. Since it was a woman, and a woman that Crown Prince Xinyuan liked, it was impossible for her to be a woman with such an ordinary appearance. Damn it! What homosexual fetish! He was clearly hiding a woman by his side. The Qishui Crown Prince's eyes flashed when he saw the exposed snow-white arm. A strange look flashed across his eyes. The way men looked at women was different from how women looked at other women. In his eyes, the woman's exposed snow-white skin could be described as ice and jade skin, especially the red chastity sand on her snow-white arm, which made people feel a sense of excitement when looking at it. For a man to cherish the woman by his side so much and allow her to keep her pure and innocent, this man must love and cherish this woman very much. She really couldn't tell that Crown Prince Xinyuan was a man who knew how to take care of women. Heh, what a surprise. What surprised him the most was this woman. Other than being surprised when he tore off her sleeve, she didn't show any signs of awkwardness or discomfort even when her snow-white arm was exposed in front of everyone. Instead, there was a hint of indifference in her indifference, which was really interesting. It seemed that this woman was indeed not an ordinary person. That was to be expected. Otherwise, how could Crown Prince Xinyuan take a liking to her? Bang! Chapter 1287. Your Highness, Brother Crown Prince. The people from Qishui were jolted awake. They cried out in alarm as they ran towards Prince Qishui, who was lying on the ground with a deathly pale face. However, a black figure was faster than any of them. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived beside Prince Qishui, who was lying on the ground with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Did I not warn you? A deep voice filled with hostility struck the hearts of the people around him like thunder. The powerful pressure contained in that voice spread out in their hearts, causing the blood in their bodies to churn. Xinyuan Mo's gathered spiritual energy in his hands and lifted Prince Qishui up from the ground like a chokehold. Spiritual energy visible to the naked eye formed a large hand that tightly gripped Prince Qishui's neck and lifted him off the ground. At this moment, Prince Qishui had no strength to resist or struggle. That attack had injured his internal organs, making it difficult for him to even breathe. He could not muster any strength in his body, let alone anything else. At this moment, he could only feel a powerful pressure and the aura of death enveloping him. At the same time, he could not help but feel a trace of fear from the bottom of his heart. Xinyuan Mose, who was ranked as the head of the 8 great empire's crown princes, was actually this strong. He was so strong that it made his heart tremble in fear. At this moment, he did not doubt that he could kill Prince Qishui with a single thought. Crown Prince Xinyuan, you can't kill my brother Crown Prince. Crown Prince Xinyuan, you can't do this. Crown Prince Xinyuan, let go of His Highness. Crown Prince Xinyuan, you're trying to destroy the diplomatic relations between our two countries. The people from Qishui country wanted to get closer, but they realized that besides Xinyuan Mose, as well as where their crown prince was, there was a powerful and frightening pressure. That pressure made it impossible for them to take another step forward, let alone rescue the person from his hands. Therefore, they could only speak out to persuade him. The 2 secret guards sent by the monarch in the dark were also stunned when they saw this scene. It turned out that the manservant was a woman who followed beside the crown prince. Moreover, she was a woman who was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. This was great. If the monarch knew about this, he would be very happy. After all, His Highness the Crown Prince had never had a woman by his side for so many years. Now that he had such a woman and doted on her, the king would not have to worry about his sexual orientation. However, what should the enraged Crown Prince do? Does he want to kill Prince Qishui? If he really did kill Prince Qishui, then things would be troublesome. Just as they felt the atmosphere tense, killing intent permeating the forest, and His Highness the Crown Prince seemed like he would snap Prince Qishui's neck at any moment, a gentle voice was heard. All right, it's nothing. Let's forget about it. Fengjiu's voice was heard. She glanced at her exposed arm. All right, she didn't feel anything. In the modern world of her previous life, she had worn 3 colors, not to mention this one. Hui Lang and Yingyi secretly sighed in relief. The ghost doctor had spoken. Master probably wouldn't kill Prince Qishui. Chapter 1288. Bang! With a heavy thud and a muffled groan, a mouthful of blood spilled out of his mouth. Prince Qishui, who was already on the verge of death, directly fainted. Your Highness! Crimson Water's people cried out in alarm. They quickly ran forward and helped him up. Some of them quickly took out pills and fed him. They were all in a mess. Xinyuan Mose glanced coldly at the person who had fainted, then turned around and walked towards Fengjia, who was standing nearby. He pulled out a black cloak from his interspace and draped it over her, covering her exposed arm and the experience points without leaving a single gap. In the dark, the 2 shadow guards saw the crown prince wrap the woman's entire body in the black cloak as if he was wrapping a treasure. Only her head was exposed. They couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They looked at each other and quickly left. Hui Lang and Yingyi saw that their master was afraid that the ghost doctor would lose a piece of flesh if someone looked at her too much. They couldn't help but lower their heads and hide the smile on their faces. When the accompanying guards saw this, they all lowered their heads and didn't dare to look at her too much. Fengjiu lowered her head and looked at the tightly wrapped woman. She couldn't help but blink and laugh. The weather seems to be quite hot. Won't it be too much if I wrap you like this? What if you get heat rash? You won't, he said in a muffled voice. He held her and walked forward. There is a spring in front. I'll take you there. Grey Wolf and Yingyi followed behind, and soon disappeared from the sight of the people behind them. Princess Shui clenched her teeth. Jealousy made her entire face twist. She saw how Crown Prince Xinyuan was furious because her brother tore off the woman's sleeve. She saw how he beat her brother until he spat out blood and was on the verge of death. No one could persuade him otherwise. However, he stopped because the woman told him to let it go. He strode toward the woman and wrapped her up with his cloak as if he was protecting a treasure. He held her by his side and took her away. From beginning to end, he only had eyes for that woman. Carry the crown prince away and send him to the palace. She stood up and ordered. Since she could not touch that woman, She would use the Xinyuan monarch to deal with that woman. She didn't believe that the monarch of Xinyuan Empire would abandon her and choose that woman of unknown origin between her and the woman of unknown origin from Chishui country. Yes, everyone replied as they carefully carried Prince Chishui away. The hunt ended because of this. Prince Chishui even rode in on a horse, but was carried out unconscious in the end. In the middle of the forest, Fangzhou washed his face and changed his clothes before walking out. Outside, Hui Lang, Ying Yi, and the others were standing in a circle with their backs to her. Xinyuan Mose was sitting under a tree. "All right," she came to his side and said, "after beating Prince Chishui up like that, your father will be furious when we get back. He told us to let them have fun, but now he has to go out lying down. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." He pulled her to sit down and handed her a piece of roasted meat. "Eat. Let's rest here for tonight. We'll go back tomorrow." "Okay." Chapter 1289. At noon the next day, they returned to the imperial city. As soon as they entered, Yang Yong stepped forward and said, "Master, the king has ordered for you to enter the palace immediately upon your return. Prepare the carriage. We will enter the palace after we have bathed and changed." He brought Fangzhou through the door and headed towards the main courtyard. "Yes," Yang Yong replied. As he ordered the servants to prepare the carriage, he pulled Hui Lang to the side and asked, "What exactly happened? Why did you knock Prince Chishui unconscious the moment you went out?" "It was Prince Chishui who sought death. You don't know, he actually went to tears as he spoke. He looked left and right and lowered his voice. He went to tear the ghost doctor's clothes and then tore her sleeves. Her entire arm was exposed to Master. Then, Master got angry and sent a palm over. He flew out just like that. In the end, the ghost doctor said to let it go. Otherwise, Master would have killed Prince Chishui." Hearing these words, Yang Yong was slightly surprised, but also understood. So it was like this, no wonder. He thought, even if Master didn't like them, he wouldn't have knocked them unconscious. "That's right, what happened to Prince Chishui? He didn't die, right?" Hui Lang asked. He remembered that he was lying on the ground and couldn't move. He didn't die, but his injuries weren't light. His internal organs were all injured, and a few of his ribs were broken. Even with the best medicine, he would have to be bedridden for a month or two. As he spoke, he sighed and shook his head. "If this matter isn't handled properly, it will be troublesome. Don't worry, Master is here. Besides, if this matter really needs to be investigated, it will be Prince Chishui's fault." Hui Lang said, "I'll go in to see Master and the others." As he spoke, he rushed inside. In the main courtyard, Xinyuan Mose had bathed and changed into a new set of robes. He sat at the stone table in the courtyard and waited for Fangzhou. About an hour later, the door opened. When he turned around, his deep black eyes couldn't help but light up. The door opened, and she slowly walked out in a dazzling red dress. Her beautiful face carried her unique charm, and the charming smile on her lips was as enchanting as a fairy's. Her clear and sly eyes contained a confident expression, and her every frown and smile emitted an enchanting charm. Her every movement was filled with unparalleled elegance. Xinyuan Mose's gaze gradually shifted upwards from the hem of her dress. His gaze swept past her slim waist, her slightly rising and falling chest, and her beautiful snowy neck. Then, his gaze landed on her beautiful smiling face and met her mesmerizing eyes. In an instant, he couldn't shift his gaze away. It was clearly just a simple red dress, without any extra embellishments, but on her body, it was extremely dazzling. So beautiful that it moved people's hearts, so beautiful that it made his heart beat wildly. So beautiful that he only wanted to keep her in his arms, and not let anyone else discover her beauty. "How is it? Is it beautiful?" She came in front of him, opened her hands slightly, and smiled as she twirled in front of him. As her body twirled, the red dress bloomed into a beautiful flower. "Beautiful, so beautiful that I don't want to bring you out." Chapter 1290. It looks good. In the future, as long as you're by my side, I'll wear a dress for you to see. She happily said. Sure enough, other people's praise and other people's surprise could not compare to a happy person's praise. Good. He revealed a smile in response. Only, after thinking for a bit, he asked, Do you have a veil? Veil? No, I don't use that kind of thing, but I do have a mask. She giggled. Forget about the mask. The mask matches your men's clothing. Wearing a woman's mask won't match. He held her hand and said, Let's go into the palace. She nodded with a smile and followed him outside. When Huilang and Yingyi saw them come out, they quickly went up to greet them. Huilang saw that Fengjiu had changed back into women's clothing. He had not seen her in women's clothing for a long time. Seeing her current appearance, he couldn't help but praise, Ghost Doctor, you're too beautiful in women's clothing. I've never seen anyone more beautiful than you. As he said this, he saw his master's cold eyes staring at him. He couldn't help being confused and asked, Master, what's wrong? Did he say something wrong? Go on your way, Xinyuan Mose said in a low voice. He looked at him with narrowed eyes. Don't speak too much nonsense. I didn't. Huilang wanted to say something, but Yingyi pulled his head down. Fengjiu looked at Huilang with a smile, and then followed Xinyuan Mose out. As she walked through the palace in women's clothing, whether it was the guards or the servants, they all curiously looked at her. Only when they got into the carriage did they withdraw their gazes. When she sat in the carriage, she saw that the man who was smiling a moment ago had a dark expression. She asked, What's wrong? It's nothing, he said and took out something for her to eat from a hidden compartment in the carriage. Eat some pastries. When we come back from the palace, we'll go back to the palace to eat something good. Yes, he replied. He picked up a piece and ate it. Then, he passed another piece to him. The carriage moved slowly towards the imperial palace. Yingyi and Huilang followed on both sides of the carriage. When they reached the main street, Xinyuan Mose lifted the curtain and glanced outside. He said, Stop the carriage. Huilang, go buy some red veils. Yes. Although Huilang was somewhat startled, he still complied. He went to a shop on the street and bought several red veils. Not long after, he returned to the side of the carriage and handed the red veils into the carriage. Master, the veils are here. Xinyuan Mose took it and handed it to Fengjiu. Keep the others. In the future, you can use them to cover your embarrassment. Just tie this one. All right. Fengjiu replied with a smile and put away the rest, leaving only one in his hand. He asked with a smile, Don't you think wearing a veil makes you more mysterious and eye-catching? Don't let people see your face. It will be safer for you when you go out in the future. As he spoke, he poured a cup of water for her. You don't have to worry in the palace. I'll take care of everything. Nothing will happen. Yes, she replied with a smile. She asked curiously, How does your father treat you? How is the relationship between you and your father? Hearing this, he paused and said, It's not good, but it's not bad either. In my impression, he's only strict. However, the reason I was able to live until now after being poisoned by the 1,000-year cold poison is partly because of him. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to live until now. Chapter 1291. The carriage headed towards the imperial palace. Fengjiu listened to Xinyuan Mose talk about him and his son, so the journey was not boring. When they arrived at the entrance of the imperial palace, Xinyuan Mose got off the carriage first, then led Fengjiu out. At this time, she had covered her face with a red veil, only revealing her eyebrows. Even though her face could not be seen, it added a mysterious sense of beauty. The two of them walked in front, followed by Huilang and Yingyi. The four of them walked into the imperial palace, and a guard came forward to lead the way. Your Highness the Crown Prince, the monarch is in the Eastern Palace. Prince Qishui and the princess are also there. As he spoke, the guard couldn't help but sneak a glance at the woman in red who was as dazzling as the sun. Was this the woman who made His Highness the Crown Prince angry and severely injured the Qishui Crown Prince? Didn't they say that Prince Qishui was on the verge of death from his injuries? He can get out of bed now? Hui Lang couldn't help but mutter. When the guard heard this, he glanced at Xinyuan Mo's, then replied in a low voice. The monarch took out a level 6 vitality recovery pill and gave it to Prince Qishui. He is fine now. Hearing this, other than Xinyuan Mo's who did not look surprised, Fengjiu, Hui Lang, and Ing Yi were somewhat surprised. Level 6 vitality recovery pill? Although she was quite talented in alchemy, the highest level of alchemy she had refined so far was only level 5. She had not refined a level 6 one yet. With a level 6 vitality recovery pill, it was not strange for Prince Qishui to recover overnight. After all, the effects of a level 6 vitality recovery pill were miraculous, far surpassing that of ordinary pills. Moreover, this was an extremely precious vitality recovery pill. On the other hand, Hui Lang and Ing Yi were surprised that even in the palace, there were very few vitality recovery pills. They did not expect that the king would be willing to take out a vitality recovery pill for Prince Qishui to consume. However, this way, even if Prince Qishui returned to Qishui province, it should not cause any waves. After all, this person was already fine. What else could he do to vent his anger? What trouble? It had to be said that the monarch had taken out this medicinal pill. At most, Master would be given a perfunctory scolding when he entered the palace today. Thinking of this, their anxious hearts could not help but relax. It was good that nothing big would happen. In fact, the monarch was quite good to Master. After all, every time Master was in trouble, he would help without a trace. However, they couldn't help but sigh when they thought about how their master and the monarch had never been able to get along with each other. This father and son pair seemed to be at odds with each other. They had never seen the two of them talk and laugh together. Chapter 1292. The woman was dressed in a simple red robe, but she was as dazzling as the sun. Everyone's attention was drawn to her at first glance. Her body was naturally filled with a languid and devilish aura. Even though her face was covered by a veil and they could not see her face clearly, they could see the confidence radiating from between her brows. Her footsteps were light and graceful as she walked within the hall. There wasn't the slightest trace of nervousness or restraint. Conversely, she gave others the feeling as if they were taking a stroll in their own backyard. Every single move she made was filled with a noble aura, especially when the woman dressed in red stood side by side with Xinyuan Mo's, who was dressed in a black robe. The aura of the two of them complemented each other perfectly. The man was handsome and domineering, and the woman was enchanting beyond compare. They couldn't help but admit that they were a perfect couple. Princess Ing Shui's hands were tightly gripping her sleeves. She could not suppress the jealousy in her heart like a poisonous snake. Her eyes became vicious and vicious because of this. She was conceited that her beauty was unparalleled. However, when she saw the woman in red today, she realized that she was much better than her even though she did not even show her face. It turned out that there was such a woman beside Xinyuan Mo's. It was no wonder that he did not like her. However, she, Ing Shui, would not let this matter rest. She did not believe that she would lose to a woman of unknown origin. Prince Qishui looked at the woman in red with a strange expression. There was a trace of amazement in the depths of his eyes. Her appearance today had surprised him. She had turned from a manservant into an enchanting and beautiful woman. This transformation really stunned him. What kind of appearance would the woman that Xinyuan Mo's had taken a fancy to be? He thought that Xinyuan Mo's would not be so superficial as to only take a fancy to this woman's appearance. Then, there must be something more attractive about this woman. The monarch withdrew his sharp gaze from Fengjiu and looked at Xinyuan Mo's. He slammed his hand on the armrest and a loud bang was heard. His angry roar echoed in the hall. Humph! Didn't I ask you to bring Prince Qishui and Princess Ing Shui out to hunt? Didn't I ask you to let them have a good time? You actually let Prince Qishui ride in on a horse and come out on a stretcher? Did you take my words for granted? It was an angry roar. However, when they heard the monarch say that he rode in on a horse and came out on a stretcher, the guards in the hall could not help but purse their lips. They lowered their heads to suppress their laughter. When the Qishui crown prince heard this, he glanced at the monarch. He felt that the monarch was doing this on purpose, and his expression turned ugly. He felt somewhat embarrassed. The dignified Prince Chishui had gone out to hunt, but was carried out on a stretcher in the end. If news of this spread back to the country, he would lose face. However, when the monarch reprimanded Xinyuan Mose, he could not say anything because everything he said was the truth. He had indeed ridden in on a horse and was carried out on a stretcher in the end. When Fangzhou heard this, the corners of his lips curled up slightly under his veil. He felt that at this time, only the monarch would be able to say something like this. If it was anyone else, it would not be good. Imperial Father, this son does not think that I have done anything wrong. Chapter 1293. Prince Chishui squinted his feminine eyes and looked at him without saying a word. Princess Shui stood up and glared at Xinyuan Mose. Crown Prince Xinyuan, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that injuring my brother Crown Prince is the way you treat your guests? Xinyuan Mose glanced at her and said in a mocking tone, Isn't he asking for it? He wanted me to spar with him, but he attacked my people after he was defeated. He's lucky that I didn't kill him on the spot. Princess Shui choked and couldn't refute him. She glared at Fangzhou and said, It's all because of this demoness. She turned to look at the person on the main seat and said, Monarch, I hope you can give us an explanation today. Don't worry, I will definitely give you an explanation. The monarch on the main seat looked at the two of them and said, How about this? Prince Chishui hasn't fully recovered yet. It's not suitable for him to sit here for too long. Go back and rest. Princess Shui was startled and said, But that woman, third princess, don't you believe me? The monarch smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. If that's the case, we'll go back and rest. Prince Chishui stood up and bowed to the monarch as he said, Although the monarch healed my injuries with a level 6 vitality recovery pill, the Chishui province won't let this matter go if you don't give us an explanation. The monarch frowned and stared at him. His voice echoed in the hall like thunder. Are you threatening me? If this king's men didn't see wrong, the reason why Chishui Crown Prince was beaten to the brink of death and needed this king to take out a 6th-grade medicinal pill to save you seems to be because you touched someone you shouldn't have touched and provoked something you shouldn't have provoked. Why? Do you think that I, the Crown Prince of the Xinyuan Empire, can be touched by anyone and everyone? Does Chishui Province have such a hobby? This emperor is giving you some leeway, and you still aren't satisfied? You dare to threaten me? Then go back and ask your imperial father to come and talk to this emperor. I'd like to know how he'll face our Xinyuan Empire if he knows about this. The Chishui Crown Prince and the third princess were both embarrassed and angry when they heard the king's merciless voice ringing through the hall. Didn't he say that he would give them an explanation? He actually turned hostile just like that? Get out of here. He glanced at the two of them, his sharp eyes filled with anger. His temper wasn't very good to begin with, so when he heard that he was being threatened, he naturally wouldn't be nice to them. Furthermore, although the two of them were the crown prince and princess of Chishui province, they were still just juniors to him. They actually dared to speak to him with such evidence, which was already a great disrespect. When Prince Chishui and Princess Chishui saw that he was angry, they knew that they had gone overboard with their words. Thus, the two of them looked at each other and quickly left. When they were about to leave the hall, Prince Chishui paused as he passed by Fangzhou. His eyes flashed with a strange light as he glanced at her before leaving. Chapter 1294. What crime is there in punishing an impudent person? Xinyuan Mose asked, his voice low and cold. Fangzhou first bowed to the monarch. Although I am quite embarrassed to have beaten the crown prince of a country to such a state, it is not right for me to not retaliate when this person dares to come to my door. Therefore, I do not feel that there is anything wrong with it. Hearing the words of the two below, the monarch narrowed his eyes and stared at Fangzhou, but said to Xinyuan Mose, You can leave. This time, Xinyuan Mose did not move. He stood there and stared at the monarch. If you are angry, come at me. It has nothing to do with her. Didn't you hear that I asked you to leave? Leave. He angrily swept his gaze and stared sharply at Xinyuan Mo's. Seeing this, Fengjiu tugged at his sleeve. Go outside and wait for me. Don't worry, it will be fine. Xinyuan Mo's furrowed his brows slightly and glanced at Fengjiu beside him. Then, he looked at his father, who was sitting in the main seat, and said in a deep voice, I'll look for you if she hurts even a hair. With that, he turned and walked out. The monarch's gaze was heavy and sharp as a knife. He glanced at Xinyuan Mo's back as he left, then looked at the woman in red standing in the middle of the hall. What is your name? Take off your veil. She obeyed and took off her veil, revealing her original appearance. She looked at the person on the main seat. My name is Fengjiu. Your appearance is not bad. No wonder he is so infatuated with you that he did not hesitate to beat up Prince Qishui. The monarch stared at her and said. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. He is not a superficial person. He has never been interested in my appearance, but me. Thinking back, she had pestered him with the appearance of a little beggar. Outside, Xinyuan Mo stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the clouds floating in the sky. His gaze was distant and deep. No one knew what he was thinking. Although he had walked out, he was still worried. His divine sense had been paying attention to the main hall, but he found that there was a soundproof enchantment inside. His eyes moved slightly, and he looked back. He saw the two of them talking about something. He didn't hear anything, but he didn't see any signs of fighting either. He didn't go in again, but stood outside and waited for about an hour. A guard walked out and came to Xinyuan Mo's and reported respectfully, Your Highness, the monarch asked you to go back first. That lady has to stay in the palace. Hearing this, his face darkened and his voice turned cold. What? The guard's heart trembled. He lowered his head and said, The monarch asked that lady to stay in the palace for a few days and asked you to go back first. Xinyuan Mo's walked in, but was stopped by a man in gray. Your Highness, please go back. Get lost, he shouted coldly. With a flick of his sleeve, a force surged out and attacked the two people. Fengjiu, who was talking to the monarch in the middle of the main hall, looked back and saw that there was a fight outside. He said to the monarch, Even if you want me to stay, I should go out and tell him personally. Otherwise, he will only hurt those people when he makes a scene. Humph, you've grown up. You dare to fight in the palace. The monarch snorted coldly and shouted at Fengjiu in an unfriendly tone. Then why are you still standing there? Go quickly. Fengjiu sighed in his heart. He turned and walked out. Stop. Chapter 1295. However, just as she spoke, she saw Xinyuan Mo stride forward and pull her out. Seeing this, she hurriedly stopped and shouted, Wait, I'll take you back. He turned around and said. His expression was still cold. He was obviously angry. Your father asked me to stay for a few days. Don't worry about him. He's your father, not someone else. Besides, I want to know why he asked me to stay. You should go back first. Don't worry, he won't kill me. Although her father's face was gloomy and his tone was unfriendly, she didn't feel any killing intent. Hearing this, he looked at her in silence. After a long time, he said, Then I'll stay with you. That's all. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked into the main hall. He looked at the person drinking tea and asked, Why did you ask her to stay? The monarch drank his tea leisurely, as if he wasn't the one who was angry. When he heard his son's words, he didn't even look at him. He pretended he didn't hear him and said to the servant beside him, This spiritual tea is good. Your Majesty, this spiritual tea is brewed with morning dew. It's more fragrant and pleasant than ordinary spiritual tea. The servant braced himself and said. He didn't dare to look at the crown prince's gloomy face. Since she's staying, I'll also stay in the palace. After Xinyuan Mo said coldly, he turned around and left with Fengjiu. It wasn't until the two of them were far away that the monarch raised his head and looked at their departing figures. He looked at his son holding Fengjiu's hand in a protective manner and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. His son had grown up, and he had a woman he wanted to protect. However, He snorted and said, "His temper is as bad as a cow's." The servant beside him lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything. On the other side, Prince Qishue and Princess Ingxue were sitting in the pavilion in the garden. Both of them didn't look good. After a long silence, Princess Ingxue asked reluctantly, "Brother Crown Prince, are we just going to let it go?" Prince Qishue glanced at her and said, "Do you think we have the ability to go against the Xinyuan Empire?" He stood up and walked out of the pavilion with his hands behind his back. Although we're one of the 8 great empires, there are strong and weak empires. If the Xinyuan Empire isn't strong, how could they be so arrogant? Even if Imperial Father was here, he would have to yield to them. In this world, the strong are respected. It's not like you don't understand. But I'm not willing to just take this lying down, she said hatefully, especially that woman. If I don't kill her, I won't be able to vent the anger in my heart. Ever since she came here, she had been humiliated time and time again, all because of that woman. What does that woman look like? Just as he was thinking about that stunning red-clothed woman, he suddenly felt a burning pain in his hand. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. He stretched his hand out from behind his back. When he saw that his entire hand had quickly become red and swollen, he couldn't help but be stunned. Princess Ingxue was startled when she heard his gasp. She walked up and asked, "Brother Crown Prince, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Chapter 1296. How did this happen? She cried out in alarm. She saw that her brother's hand was swollen red and swollen. In just a short while, his hand had swollen to twice its original size. It was as thick as a bear's paw. What shocked her the most was that when she reached out to touch it, it was as if she had touched a piece of fire. She quickly withdrew her hand. "Brother Crown Prince, let's go back quickly. Let's see what happened." She supported him. She thought that even though his body was gradually recovering after taking a level 6 vitality recovery pill, it would still take a few days for him to recover to his original state. Now that his hand was swollen for no reason, what should she do? Prince Qishue stared at his hand. After recovering from his astonishment, he seemed to be deep in thought. He remembered that this was the hand that tore that woman's clothes. Could it be? When he thought of this, his eyes flickered. If that was the case, why couldn't the doctor who examined him find anything? Could it be that that woman was an expert in using poison? Last time, he almost collapsed. This time, his hand was swollen like a bear's paw. This was all her doing. The burning sensation on his hand spread from his palm to his body. It was painful and unbearable, causing large beads of sweat to seep out of his forehead. He endured the intense burning sensation until it was difficult to breathe. He gasped for air and allowed his sister to support him back. However, when he passed by, he saw the 2 accompanying people. When he saw them, his eyes turned gloomy. To think that he, the dignified Prince Qishue, had fallen into their hands again and again. It was truly hateful. When Xinyuan Mose walked over and saw Prince Qishue, his eyes turned cold. However, when he noticed the red and hot palm, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Princess Ingxue stared at the woman in red who was wearing a veil and gritted her teeth. She supported her brother and was about to walk past them. At this moment, she heard the woman's voice that was filled with laughter. "Prince Qishue, why is your hand red and swollen? Is it serious?" Fengjiu smiled as she looked at the Qishue crown prince, who was having a hard time holding back. She was overjoyed. She dared to tear her clothes? Was it so easy to tear her clothes? "Miss, you're quite capable." He gasped for air and stared at the woman in red. He saw that her eyes were full of smiles. "This is my reward for tearing Prince Chishue's clothes. You don't have to thank me." "It's you. You poisoned Brother Crown Prince?" Ingxue asked. If Crown Prince Xinyuan wasn't here, she would have pounced on her face. "Poison? No, no. How could I poison the Qishue Crown Prince? You are my guests." "Of course, that." She shook her head and said. When she saw that Princess Ingxue was about to attack her, she kindly reminded her, "Princess Ingxue, don't get too close to me." I still have some medicinal powder with me. By the way, do you smell any fragrance? When she said this, Prince Qishui and Princess Yingshue's expressions changed. They didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly left. Looking at their fleeing figures, Fangzhou couldn't help but chuckle. So cowardly. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.